The first time I noticed the cabins, I was hiking through the back edge of my property with my dog, Jasper. What should have been forest and deer trails was now a row of foundation slabs and a black SUV with a HOA security decal parked beside it. I crouched down, blinked twice, and stared. My name's Preston McAllister. I'm a retired forestry engineer, and I've owned this slice of woodland in northern Georgia for 19 years. I don't live in the HOA community down the road, I live just outside their jurisdiction, which is exactly how I like it. No newsletters, no meetings. No Karens. At least, that's what I thought. 2 days later, I showed up at the construction site with a trail cam in one hand and my property map in the other. There were already 6 half-finished cabins standing. Framing crews worked like they were on a deadline from the devil. I flagged down a guy hauling lumber. "Hey, who's in charge here?" I asked. He pointed toward a woman in a pastel-pink windbreaker barking at someone over a blueprint. Mid-50s, frosted blonde bob and a clipboard practically glued to her hand. "Florence Kessler," the guy muttered. "HOA president, don't get in her way." Perfect, I walked up to her and said, "Excuse me, ma'am, this is private property, I think there's been a mistake." She didn't even look up. "No mistake. These cabins are part of Timberwood Hills expansion. You're standing on common-use land," I laughed. "Not unless the county changed the deed without telling me. I own this land, Florence." Now she looked up, squinted at me like I was something she found under her shoe. "That can't be right." "We've had this project approved for months." "You approved it on land you don't own," I said, holding out the property map. "This entire zone, mine, has been since 2005. She waved it off like I was showing her a takeout menu. "Well, if that's true, you'll need to take it up with the board." "We've already broken ground. You'll make things very complicated if you try to interfere." I narrowed my eyes. "You mean complicated for you?" Florence smiled, and it was the fakest thing I'd ever seen. "We're revitalizing the area. These cabins will bring in tourists, revenue, and prestige. You should be thanking us." Then she turned back to her clipboard, dismissing me like I was some lost hiker. I didn't argue, I left, but I wasn't done. Instead, I went home, pulled up every deed, map, and legal doc I had, and drove straight to the county assessor's office. 30 minutes later, I walked out with a certified copy of the land records in my hand and something better. An idea. Let them build. Let them finish every last cabin, and then I'd own every dollar that came out of it. The first week after my visit to the assessor's office, I installed motion-triggered trail cams across the perimeter where my land met the Timberwood Hills development. I didn't care about catching raccoons or deer, I wanted faces, license plates, and timestamps. By Wednesday, I had over 100 images of contractors, HOA board members, and even Florence herself walking across what legally belonged to me. The cabins were going up fast. Prefab sections, pine siding, and cheap concrete foundations. There were now 12 of them, all identical. No permits from the county, no inspections. At night, Jasper and I sat on the porch and watched the glow of their floodlights through the trees, listened to the hammering echoing through the hills. I wasn't angry, I was documenting. I dropped off the first batch of evidence with a real estate attorney I'd worked with years ago. Her name was Marla Kent, and she'd once taken a crooked land developer to court and walked away with title to his boat, his vacation home, and half the resort he tried to build on protected wetlands. "You're telling me they've built on your land without a signed lease, easement, or even a conversation about usage?" she asked, flipping through the photos. "Didn't even ask," I said. "They're running electrical and water lines, too." I traced a trench back to the Timberwood utility box. Marla leaned back in her chair and grinned. "This is going to be expensive for them. They're calling it a revitalization project. Think they're planning to rent them out as weekend cabins." Marla's eyes gleamed. "That's even better. That's revenue. You don't just have a case for trespassing, you've got a civil suit for unlawful enrichment, and if they collect a dime from those rentals, they owe you every penny." "Every last one," I said. Marla nodded. "Let them finish, then we file." Over the next month, I kept my distance. I attended no HOA meetings, filed no complaints, and stayed completely off their radar. Meanwhile, Marla quietly filed a cease and desist with the County Development Office, ensuring that no further permits could be processed for Timberwood Hills without a full audit of land use. She didn't send it to the HOA. We wanted them to keep building. By mid-October, all 33 cabins were complete. The HOA had even put up a gaudy wooden sign on the main road, Timberwood Forest Retreat. They launched a website, started running ads for short-term rentals, and partnered with a local property management company called Alpine Stay. I booked one of the cabins. I used a fake name, Roger Dillard, and a throwaway email. Jasper and I packed a suitcase, parked the truck at a friend's place, and walked in through the back trail. I recorded everything. The keyless entry, the guest welcome packet, the laminated rules sheet that mentioned the HOA by name. Inside the cabin, there was branded stationery, a mini fridge stocked by a Timberwood vendor, and a QR code for booking firewood delivery. When we left the next morning, I had everything I needed. Receipts, photos, a copy of the rental agreement, and proof of commerce conducted entirely on my land. Marla filed the lawsuit the next day. We didn't go to the HOA first. We went directly to the Superior Court of Fulton County and filed a civil action against Timberwood Hills Property Owners Association, Florence Kessler, and Alpine Stay Management, citing unlawful trespass, illegal construction, operation of a commercial enterprise on private property, and unlawful enrichment. We requested an immediate injunction to freeze all rental activity. 3 days later, the court granted it. Marla served the injunction in person. "I think you'll want to read this," she said, handing Florence the thick envelope in front of a dozen stunned board members during one of their open-to-the-public meetings. Florence opened it, read the first 2 pages, and turned a shade of gray I didn't know skin could produce. "You can't be serious," she said. "You built 33 income-generating cabins on land that doesn't belong to you," Marla said. "And now, every dollar you've made, are making, or will make from that enterprise is subject to seizure." Florence's voice dropped. "We were under the impression that the land was common use." "No," I said, stepping into the room, "you were under the impression that I wouldn't notice." The meeting dissolved into chaos. Some board members were whispering furiously, others asking if they were personally liable. One guy looked like he was about to throw up. Florence tried to regain control. "This can't be right. There must be a mistake. We had maps. We had surveys." "Show them," Marla said. Florence didn't move. "We'll wait," Marla added. Finally, one of the board members, a guy named Ted, stood up and fished a manila folder from his briefcase. He handed it to me without making eye contact. Inside were 2 maps. Both printed off a free online parcel viewer. No stamps, no surveyor signatures, no official records. "You based $1 million rental expansion on Google Earth," Marla said. Ted looked like he wanted to disappear. I handed the maps back. "My deed predates your HOA by nearly a decade. You had no right to touch anything on that land." "We don't have the money to settle this," Florence said quietly. "I know," I said. "That's why I'm not asking you to settle. I'm asking for full damages." By the end of the week, the court had appointed a receiver to take over all rental income from the cabins. Alpine Stay was ordered to divert all funds to an escrow account under court supervision. I didn't touch a penny yet, not until the court rendered its judgment. But the damage inside Timberwood Hills was immediate. I wasn't the only one Florence had alienated. 2 board members resigned. A third went to the county to report unpermitted electrical hookups. A fourth called a local reporter, and then came the police. Apparently, the trench dug through the utility easement had damaged a municipal water line. A contractor had used a borrowed permit number from another job. When the city inspectors dug into it, they found records altered by someone in the HOA's planning subcommittee. A criminal investigation was opened. 2 people were arrested. One of them was Florence's nephew. The county revoked Timberwood's right to operate short-term rentals pending the outcome of the investigation, which meant the cabins sat empty. No visitors, no income. Just 33 vacant testaments to HOA arrogance, lined up like dominoes waiting to fall. Marla filed an amended complaint to transfer title of every cabin to me. I didn't want to own them. Not really. But I wanted the HOA to know what it felt like to lose something they thought was theirs. And the court agreed. On a rainy Tuesday morning in January, I stood outside Cabin 7 with a county official, a locksmith, and a title transfer form. "Congratulations," the official said. "You now own 33 cabins." Jasper barked once like he understood. Florence didn't show up. Neither did anyone else from the board. I changed the locks, updated the deed, and made a phone call to a local veterans housing nonprofit. By spring, every one of those cabins would house someone who needed a permanent place to live rent-free. On my land. Let the HOA choke on that. The first time I saw Florence Kessler after the court handed me the titles was at a zoning board hearing she hadn't planned on attending. I wasn't there to gloat. I was there because the Timberwood Hills Board had filed a desperate motion to reclassify the cabins as emergency housing to stall their removal from the HOA's books. They were trying to use the same cabins they'd illegally built to curry favor with the county and save face. I arrived early and took a seat in the back row. Florence walked in late, flanked by a man in a navy blazer who looked like he'd been pulled out of a golf course mid-swing. As soon as she spotted me, her jaw flexed. She sat in the front row without acknowledging anyone. When the board chair called the petition, Florence's attorney stood and delivered a speech laced with carefully chosen buzzwords: community integration, humanitarian need, and temporary setbacks. He called the cabins a visionary project that had simply suffered from administrative oversights. I waited until the board opened the floor for comment. "My name is Preston McAllister," I said, stepping up to the mic. "The land these cabins were built on belonged to me until I was forced to take legal action. The HOA never requested permission, never negotiated, and never followed county building codes. They fabricated property lines and misrepresented ownership to contractors and vendors. They're not visionaries, they are trespassers." The room fell silent. Then one of the board members, a woman with a tablet in her lap, tilted her head. "Mr. McAllister, are you saying the HOA knowingly built these structures on land that wasn't theirs?" "Yes, and I have the court documents to prove it." I handed over copies of the judgment, the injunction, and the final ruling transferring ownership. They've already lost the cabins. What they're trying to do now is rewrite the story. Florence stood abruptly. "This is vindictive. You've made your point. You got what you wanted." I turned to her. "What I wanted was for you to stay off my land. You ignored that." Repeatedly. The board voted unanimously to deny the reclassification. Outside, as I walked to my truck, the man in the navy blazer caught up to me. "You know, there's still a way to make this go away," he said. "Sell the cabins back to Timberwood. You'll get market value and we'll drop the appeal." "I'm not in the business of laundering other people's mistakes," I said. "Tell Florence this isn't something she can buy her way out of." He muttered something under his breath and walked off. 2 weeks later, a deputy rang my doorbell just after dawn. "Mr. McAllister," he said, "we need you to come down to the station. It's regarding your complaint about the Timberwood Hills HOA." I grabbed my coat and followed him without asking questions. At the station, I was shown into a small conference room where a detective named Rivas sat with a thick file and a serious expression. "We've been reviewing documentation from the civil case," he said. "Your lawyer gave us access to the escrow records and the parcel files." Something caught our attention. He flipped open the folder and slid a page toward me. "Is this your signature?" I looked. It was a permit application for utility trenching across the property line. My name was on it, but the signature was not mine. "No," I said immediately. "I never signed that," Rivas nodded. "That's what we thought. We ran the document through a forensic analysis. The signature was traced from a public record using a light box and a mechanical pencil. The same person submitted 4 other permits under your name. Who? I asked. A man named Clayton Renshaw. He was contracted by the HOA as a planning consultant. I didn't recognize the name, Rivas continued. We pulled his emails from a subpoena. He was working closely with Florence Kessler. There are messages where she instructs him to get the papers through by any means necessary and refers to your land as temporary leverage. Leverage? I repeated. Rivas nodded. They knew, they just didn't care. I sat back in my chair. What happens now? We're filing charges for forgery, falsifying public records, and conspiracy to commit fraud. Miss Kessler will be arrested this week. We'll need you to testify when it gets to court. I agreed without hesitation. Florence was arrested the following Thursday. It made the local news. A grainy photo of her being led out of the Timberwood Hills HOA office in handcuffs ran on the front page of the county paper beneath the headline. HOA president charged in land fraud scandal. The rest of the board dissolved within days. One resigned quietly. 2 others were forced out when homeowners held an emergency vote. The HOA was left without leadership, without funds, and without any properties to manage. The cabins were no longer theirs, and the scandal had tainted every aspect of their operation. Meanwhile, I followed through with the housing nonprofit. By spring, the cabins were renovated and furnished with the help of local donations. A team of volunteers helped install solar panels, donated by a tech startup in Atlanta that wanted to support veteran housing projects. Garden beds were built. A small community center replaced the HOA's old equipment shed. The first residents moved in by March. Each one had a story. A former paramedic who'd lost his home in a fire. A retired Marine who'd been couch surfing for 2 years. A woman who'd served in the Coast Guard and had been living out of her car. I didn't ask for rent. I asked for nothing, but word about the transformation spread fast. Local news came out again, this time with cameras and microphones. They interviewed residents, volunteers, and even the county commissioner, who called it one of the most inspiring acts of community restoration this county has ever seen. I didn't give interviews. I just stood in the shade with Jasper, watching kids ride bikes between cedar cabins that had once been built as luxury getaways for tourists. Now they were homes, filled with laughter, music, and second chances. The civil suit ended with a final ruling in my favor. The court awarded damages, but most of the HOA's accounts had been drained, covering legal fees and fines from the zoning violations. I didn't bother collecting what was left. The final blow came from the State Housing Board. After reviewing the evidence from the criminal investigation, they voted to decertify Timberwood Hills as a registered HOA. Without that certification, they lost their authority to enforce bylaws or collect dues. The association, for all legal purposes, ceased to exist. Residents who had lived in fear of arbitrary fines and surveillance were suddenly free. They held a block party in May. I was invited. I brought cornbread and a cooler of sweet tea. People I'd never met shook my hand, thanked me for what I'd done. I didn't tell them that none of it had been planned, that it had all started with a walk through the woods and the sight of concrete where there should have been pine needles. All I said was, I just wanted to protect what was mine. And somehow, along the way, I'd helped give something back to them too. By late spring, the cabins had been transformed into a functional neighborhood. The nonprofit had named the project Pine Haven Commons, and the residents had taken to planting flowers along the walkways and hanging wind chimes from porch beams. The air smelled like lilac and fresh soil, and for the first time in months, I stopped expecting drama every time my phone buzzed. That didn't last. One morning around 6, I was feeding Jasper when I noticed a drone hovering just above the tree line near my back fence. It wasn't some kid's toy either. This was a commercial quadcopter, the kind used for aerial surveys or real estate photography. It hovered in place for a few minutes, then zipped off toward the road like it had finished its job. I didn't like it. I called Marla and told her what I saw. She didn't hesitate. "That's not good," she said. "Someone's either building a case or planning something they don't want seen from the ground." 2 days later, a noise complaint was filed against Pine Haven, then another, and another, always anonymous, always vague, disturbance late at night, suspicious foot traffic, possible squatters. The sheriff's office sent a deputy on each occasion, and each time he left shaking his head, apologizing for the waste of time. But the complaints kept coming. Then came a letter. It was from a firm called Belridge Property Consultants. Apparently, they'd recently acquired interest in the Timberwood Hills area, and they were requesting clarification regarding zoning compliance and nonconforming land use. The letter was careful legalese wrapped in politeness, but the message was clear. Someone was preparing to challenge Pine Haven's legitimacy. I brought the letter to Marla. She narrowed her eyes, flipped the envelope over, and read the return address again. "Belridge works exclusively with asset recovery firms," she said. "They don't send letters unless someone's paying them to find a loophole." "Florence?" I asked. Marla shook her head. "She's out on bond and has a gag order, but someone else could be pulling strings, someone with money and an axe to grind." I didn't have to wait long for confirmation. A week later, I got a call from Detective Rivas. "We reopened part of the investigation," he said. Turns out Florence wasn't working alone. Financial records we subpoenaed show that she was getting monthly deposits from a shell company based in Delaware. That shell company is owned by a man named Everett Cole. The name didn't ring a bell. He used to be a developer, Rivas continued. Got burned on a failed hotel project near Lake Allatoona. Guess who blocked that permit, County Forestry Review, which you used to manage? I rubbed my temple. "You're telling me this guy's been nursing a grudge against me for years?" "Looks like it," Rivas said. "And now he's trying to buy up distressed HOA communities, scrub their reputations, and flip them into resort investments. Timberwood was supposed to be his comeback." "And I ruined that," I said. "No," Rivas corrected. "You exposed it. Now we're looking into fraud charges against Cole too." He funded the illegal expansion, laundered money through construction contracts, and tried to bury the paper trail under fake consulting firms. I stared out at the tree line at the cabins nestled between green hills. "So what do I do?" "Stay the course," Rivas said. "We're building a case." But Cole wasn't waiting for court. He went to the County Zoning Commission and filed a motion to challenge the reclassification of the land Pine Haven now sat on. His argument: that the rezoning was rushed, improperly reviewed, and done without proper public notice. It was thin, but not impossible. Marla and I went to the hearing. Cole showed up in a tailored charcoal suit with a bright red tie and a legal team that looked like they were billing by the second. He was calm, polished, and absolutely full of it. "I have nothing against Mr. McAllister," he said, hands clasped like a preacher. "But this community deserves transparency. We're simply asking for a thorough review to ensure zoning laws were followed." I stepped up next. "I've got no issue with a review," I said to the board. "But let's be clear, this man funded illegal construction, laundered money through a fraudulent HOA, and is now trying to reclaim property he lost fair and square. This isn't about zoning, it's about revenge." One of the commissioners raised an eyebrow. "Do you have evidence of these claims?" Marla stood. "We do, and more is coming." She handed over a sealed affidavit from Detective Rivas and a copy of the financial disclosures tied to the shell company. The board took one look and recessed for deliberation. They came back 20 minutes later and denied Cole's motion. He didn't speak, just gathered his files and walked out with his lawyers trailing behind. That night, someone slashed the tires on my truck. I didn't report it. I just replaced them, installed a new set of motion-activated lights, and added 2 more trail cams, this time facing the road. The next move came from the IRS. They issued a temporary freeze on Cole's business accounts pending a federal audit. The fraud wasn't just local. He'd been running similar scams in 3 counties and funneling profits through a nonprofit shell in Nevada. That opened the floodgates. Contractors came forward. Former employees. Even a Timberwood board member who'd skipped town during the original scandal. They all confirmed the same thing. Cole had bankrolled the cabins, faked permits, and used Florence as his proxy. The federal charges came swiftly: wire fraud, tax evasion, conspiracy, racketeering. Cole was arrested at a private airfield trying to board a charter flight to the Keys. The U.S. Attorney's Office held a press conference. They called it one of the most egregious abuses of community governance in recent state history. Florence's plea deal included full cooperation. She was sentenced to 18 months in a minimum security facility and barred from holding any public or private administrative position for life. The final chapter came quietly. 6 months after Cole's conviction, I received a letter from the county commissioner's office. Pine Haven Commons was being designated a protected community under the County Resilience and Housing Stability Act. That meant permanent zoning status, tax exemptions, and a community advisory board with elected resident members. I was invited to serve as a non-voting advisor. I declined. I had what I needed. The cabins remained peaceful. Residents planted fruit trees and installed a small playground. A local artist painted a mural on the side of the community center: mountains, trees, and 33 cabins nestled under a golden sky. I took Jasper for a walk past it one evening just before sunset. A little girl ran past us, laughing, chasing a paper kite shaped like a hawk. Her mother waved from the porch, where she sat weaving a basket with another resident. Wind chimes jingled softly above their heads. I paused, looking back at the mural. It wasn't just a painting. It was a reminder of what happens when people in power think no one's watching, of what a single piece of land can become when greed is replaced with care, and of how quickly justice can grow roots when you give it the space to breathe.